Welcome everybody to Marketeers Clubhouse. I'm Jamie Calon, producer Brad sitting in the background today. And today I have the luxury of delving into what PR is. Now, in the grand scheme of marketing, there is like a billion different little divisions that exist, and I understand many of them, but I definitely don't have a great handle on the intricate relationship with public relations and product being a really generic term, because a product can be a person or it could be a pair of shoes. It can be like anything. So today I've got a mutual friend of mine, Shana Frahm. I got it right.
You got it right.
Every time. Shana is based out of the US. She's got this insanely diverse background that goes from action sports all the way through to politics in the world of PR. And to start my delve into understanding this subsection of marketing, you're the perfect start. So welcome.
Thanks. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. We're recording this just days after the election in the US, and public relations has changed a ton. And I feel that even based off of this is just me guessing at a few things. So I want to guess at a couple things.
Okay.
My feeling is that PR was very, very strong in traditional media, and traditional media is fragmenting and looks ridiculous. And it's very, they're picking their sides very specifically. Like it's, you're a Democrat leaning thing or you're a Republican leaning thing. And podcasts and all these other things seem to be taking the lead on driving forward. Trump went definitively into some really, really blue collary podcast things that got him tons of exposure, and whether it helped him or not, that's I'm not an expert in it, but they went definitely that way. Camilla went into her own sort of little world and did some of that, but traditional media was sort of standing around trying to grab sound bites and looking silly. Before we go too far, I want to get back to this, but I feel that this is almost the end of the discussion. I want to talk about what PR is and that. So can you educate me a little bit on what PR does, where it sits in the cycle of whether it's a human or a pair of shoes? Where should PR sit in the hierarchy is the wrong word, but in the order of operations for marketing?
So that's a great question. There are two approaches that the large companies take with public relations and communications. One is to have it fall under the C-suite. So PR and comms report directly to the C-suite and to the CEO. The other is to have it report to marketing. I've been in all situations. So I've worked in-house for large brands as the head of global PR. I've worked for agencies. And there's always a little bit of back and forth because PR has the ear of the outside world, right? We're determining how you communicate with the outside world. So oftentimes the CEO will have a strong opinion. So will the chief marketing officer. So will the head of creative. So will the head of product and design. So you're balancing all the needs of these individuals who often have conflicting opinions about how something should be pushed out to the world. And this is not me talking about politics. This is just corporate America. So what you have to do as the head of PR is you have to balance that. And it can be a little bit tricky when different groups have different opinions about how things should move forward. Sales, for instance, has a much different opinion often. So what I like to do, my approach when I go into a company is to do an audit immediately and to determine what everybody is thinking and feeling. And I take great input from the sales team because they're the ones that are out in the field. They're the ones that know their customers. Obviously, the United States is a country of 300 million people, and we have all these diverse regions, and different people have different styles. And so I like to hear from sales as to how, say, if you have a product, whether it be a snowboard or a restaurant, how that product resonates and how that brand resonates with the consumer in that market, because every market can be so different. And that strategy, you take that global too when you're working for a global company. So how does the product resonate within every country in Europe, within every country in Asia or South America, even Canada? When I worked with Icebreaker New Zealand Merino, I had very different input and feedback from every single region. So I would be visiting Vancouver and Toronto and Calgary and Montreal, 2 or 3 times a year to get input from the regions on what their regions wanted to see. So you have to take that input from sales and you have to take the input from marketing. And some of the best and most successful companies, they actually lead with PR and the rest of the marketing wheel falls under it, because we have two people that we're serving. We have the internal company that needs what it needs, and then we have journalists who, quite frankly, they're on their own timelines, they're on their own deadlines, and we have to meet their needs. That means if a journalist has a 12-month calendar and specific dates and gates they're rolling out, so say you're a tech company and you go to CES the first week of January, and then you roll into South by Southwest, and then you roll into all these different events, and you have 4 seasons that you're launching product. PR has to actually respond to your needs as a journalist with completed assets, with product guides, with sample materials. Even if the product's not on sale yet, we have to get samples into the hands of journalists to try so they can review them. And we have to meet those journalists' deadlines, and those deadlines will not move for a particular brand, right? So you have to organize things. So some of the great companies that I've done work with, for example, Sonos Wireless Audio, they actually had this big room where we put all of the global PR needs on a wall, and then everybody that was working on the different areas of marketing, whether it be channel marketing or asset creation, their deadlines would fall under PR's needs, because PR's needs are really journalist needs. So it doesn't make sense if you miss all the journalist deadlines. So does that make sense? Does that help?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. So if I could boil this down for people listening that are as simple as
Mm-hmm.
me, you are taking, um, because of the lead cycle of journalism, which would be very akin to the lead cycle of brick and mortar retail, you're in essence selling the brand story, just like the salespeople are out selling the product and brand story into brick and mortar.
Mm-hmm.
Your lead times would be very similar because you have to retail deals with seasonality,
Yeah.
Christmas and holiday and all, summer and spring and all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
So in the grand scheme of things, you need to be, people don't understand the complexity, like,
Mm-hmm.
of bringing a brand to life in market, and PR being, I would have never thought of the journalist's lead cycle of production of article and where it fits. And then
Mm-hmm.
they actually have to deal with seasonality as well. So if you're a tech writer, releasing the new stuff for holiday, which Sonos and all these different companies will have product releases for Christmas sales,
Mm-hmm.
the all the PR and marketing needs to be done midsummer. You're teeing that all up quite early, I would assume.
Yeah.
Just like any product is going to get put into brick and mortar, needs to be ahead of all PR as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
well, not ahead, but done at that same time period. It's very complex,
It is.
and so that makes sense to me. There's PR seems to be a really interesting thing because you've got your, and tell me if I'm wrong,
Mm-hmm.
you have your very straightforward agenda. one of your pillars
Right.
is a very straightforward agenda. You have whether it's a product or a person, and not, let everyone remember every artist has a PR agent. Every actor, like all of these people have PR, and they're doing PR in different ways. Product PR slightly different than all these other things, but PR for the American Cancer Society would be the same formula as a PR for a shoe, but everything would be slightly tweaked because of the messaging and what you're actually trying to do as your final goal. They're trying to raise, basically, they're selling fundraising. Like they need to raise money, but they're, they're still out actually promoting their stuff. When it's a politician, we all know, we just saw what they're selling and what they're trying to do. They're trying to gain votes and gain all these different things. So regardless of the product, you then PR gets jammed into also crisis management channels.
Regulator simplifies the management of fixtures and displays for brands. We provide a seamless solution to allocate, order, ship, track, and manage lifecycle processes from installation to disposal. It's the all-in-one tool that ensures your brand moves smoothly in the market without any bottlenecks. Give us 15 minutes to show you how we will save you time and money. Go to brandregulator.com.
So with crisis communications, and I think that this is really important when you have a consumer products brand or you have a hospitality brand like a restaurant or a hotel, you must have a crisis PR plan in place. And one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got was someone here in Austin, Texas. His name is Jeff Eller, and he has a very famous crisis PR communications agency. And one of the things that he told me about 15 years ago when we started using influencers for events is he said, you need to be very, very careful that you have a PR plan created before you start reaching out to the press too much, because in pretty much every instance, if you have a product recall and you don't have a PR plan for crisis in place, when you have a crisis hit, within 18 months, 80% of those companies go bankrupt because they have not workshopped the potential situations. So I've been up against so many different situations, product recalls. So sometimes a product will be, perfectly, it passes the inspections in the US, say a hard goods product, but Germany, it doesn't. So then you have these huge, situations where there's a recall in Germany and there's not a recall in the United States. So when you workshop your PR plan for proactive happy PR, is what I call it, you absolutely have to put in the plan for, you work with athletes. What if there's an athlete injury? There's HIPAA laws about that. So what's your communications tree look like if an athlete is injured? How do you go about that to protect the brand and the family and the athlete? You have to be very, very delicate about situations like that. So you need to go in and workshop that. You have a surf competition and there's a hurricane. I've actually been in that situation where we had the Quicksilver Pro New York, and the biggest hurricane to hit New York City in a decade was coming in, and we had a $10 million event set up on the beach, and the government officials are calling saying that they're going to shut down transportation for the first time in the history of New York City. So we had to shut down that event, evacuate the city, and then come back 3 days later for a rebuild. Meanwhile, athletes were stranded at airports all over the world. I had 2,000 media coming in. The team did, and everybody was on hold, and then we had to build it back up and put on the event after the hurricane. So you have to workshop these situations, and sometimes PR is not the most popular person in the room, I have to say, because we have to anticipate certain situations.
Yeah, I can assume that. Yeah,
And there's
that makes sense to me.
And there's also, when you're doing a PR plan for proactive PR, it's really important to realize that journalists are beholden to their producers and their editors to write about stories that will absolutely get views. That is crucial. And so the journalists and the editors and the producers with its television are working with a limited amount of real estate, right? And even if it's digital real estate, still a limited amount of real estate. They can't just turn around and reactively put up a story because you decided to do a product launch and not tell your PR team. So it's, it takes time. And that's why we always say 3 to 6 months lead times would be great, so that we give the journalists the time to pitch their editor, to get buy-in, to perhaps have a meeting with the product development team or the CMO or the CEO, and then get that story to market. So right now, holiday gift guide time, those things are all in the bag right now. They were planned out even the spring before. When I was with Burton, we used to do a great PR showroom for the winter holidays, and we did that every April in New York City. We made it really easy for the journalists. All our product was there. All our spokespeople were there. Journalists would come through. They'd see the whole line. They'd see Burton, Channel Islands, all the different Gravis, all the different brands that we had. They were able to see them in one place in New York City, in Soho. It was really easy for them to get to. And a lot of the big PR firms will do those kinds of showroom events, but you have to do them 6 months in advance to give people time to plan their stories.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I always look at consumer engagement as a 360, and the initial attract component, which has got the PR in it. Like there's attract engagement, and then you're at retail and you're hopefully closing the sale. So you guys being in that attract area and having to be so far out, it creates a ton of questions I have. And this goes back to my very first thing with traditional media kind of being blown up. There are no magazines, really. There are, like, Dwell exists in home goods. There's like one thing. Architectural Digest and Dwell kind of exist in this space. Sports Illustrated is barely a thing. Snowboard magazines are up and down and all over the map. They're kind of gone, kind of back. That whole industry has its own issues. With sort of that traditional media cratering, what is the new stance on, like, you're no longer reaching out and talking to the editor at Elle magazine necessarily. You would, that's a bad example. I'm assuming Elle still exists. But you're probably also, there's bloggers who let's say it's in the makeup world, there's way more influential people doing small podcasts or TikToks or those types of things. How has that wormed its way into your guys' world? There has to be agendas against attacking new media, because new media is it's established itself as more authentic and less tinkered with, might be the wrong word, but more authentic, I guess, would be.
No, I definitely understand what you're saying, and I have so many different opinions about this, so hopefully this will come across the right way. I definitely still support legacy media. I believe that it still does move the needle for brands. If they're publicly held brands, those people that are interested in investing are still interested in reading the Financial Times, reading The Economist, reading the Wall Street Journal. I'll give, without saying names, I had a client with a shoe that hit in June in the Wall Street Journal style section, sold tens of thousands of shoes off of that one hit. So I don't think it's dead. I still think that Sports Illustrated has massive viewers still. So one of my friends actually is the producer for a podcast for Sports Illustrated, and the millions of views that they're getting are fantastic. So I would say that traditional media is definitely not dead, and it's definitely still necessary, because there's a journalist code of ethics that they still have to abide by. Off the record still holds. So if you want to tell a journalist something, they have to abide by a certain code of ethics, and they still do a lot of research. You work on a story with Inc. or Entrepreneur magazine. you're going to be working with a fact checker once that story goes to print. I've done tons of cover stories with them, or Fast Company, for example. There's those fact checkers take a lot of time. It takes like 2 weeks sometimes to go through with a fact checker and get everything right, the little tiny details. So I think that's really important. And I think if we lose that, we're in trouble, because if you have a non-traditional media outlet now, you don't have those guidelines and boundaries and rules. So it can get really, really dangerous. You don't know what you're reading. So while I completely support podcasts, I love them, and I love the reach that they give people and the niche audiences, I don't think we should discount or try to push to the side traditional media.
As long as it's functionally still working, I don't disagree with you. Like, the reach of it is still incredible. It's still incredible. It gets pumped into your house and shows up on a screen, and it's there. It's like, it is a thing. Traditional media is a really cool thing. However, it has competition now. It just does.
It does, yes.
And its competition lives without rules, in its own way, is a terrible thing. Like X has, like community notes and that sort of stuff that can exist with it. And they try, but even those media things have been proven to be terribly censored and all that sort of stuff. And it's not such a problem when it's a shoe, but it's a problem when it's a political agenda or a social agenda or something where you can have very polarizing topics. And I don't deal in polarizing marketing. I just don't.
Yeah.
I deal with selling fun toys.
Right.
But when I know you've had to delve into selling more polarizing agendas and doing public relations for that, that's where I think that gets sticky. And there are no rules in the new media. Is ruleless. Like, it is kind of built that way on purpose. And I just can't even possibly imagine, like, to your point, off the record is a thing that exists with real journalists. Off the record is not a thing that anyone else has to abide by.
Right.
It's not in there. Like, there are no ethics for a podcaster.
Yeah.
There's no, I didn't start my podcast and someone said, here's your guidelines of how to conduct your thing correctly. Like, it's non-existent. I can just do it. Of course, I try to be a good person and do all that stuff, but now it's left up to the individual instead of an industry.
Right.
So how do you trust new media? How do you trust, like, without getting into it, there's contracts. So for individuals that are helping you promote something, there's contracts. But for new media, there's no contracts necessarily. It's relationship.
No, but it's interesting. You brought up core media. You brought up snowboard publications, right? So
Sure.
That's an interesting example. So when we're talking product PR now. There have always been some type of version of new media out there that we had to address and service. So for example, you're launching a new technology product, and one company did this absolutely brilliantly. Their first PR person that they hired, he made the decision to go to every single tech reviewer and have them pick his product apart and then give glowing reviews. And those reviews from those hardcore tech guys, right? The guys that know everything about technology, and they're either journalists or they're bloggers. Those guys give the reviews that then the mainstream publications look to pay attention. And then from that core group, the mainstream picks up on it. Does that make sense? So
no, 100%, which to me actually is also quite a scary thing, because unless those media outlets are picking up on the very correct stuff, they could be echoing bad information because it may not be vetted. Their vetting might stop at that person.
Right.
which we have seen in the political realm where someone creates a soundbite and the soundbite is inaccurate, taken out of context, and it gets echoed over and over by mainstream media, and it's actually an incorrect soundbite. And that is a thing that can, I guess, proven. That's a thing that happens, which, again, like when you're in control from the PR level, I feel that there's like a puppet mastery thing going on where you're trying to help control that narrative all the way through to get the purest story. And if you're selling a shoe, you're selling like you're trying to tell, you are selling an agenda. And there would be good PR people and there'd be bad PR people, and bad PR people turn into people who produce propaganda. But probably very good, because that would be one really bad arm of extending messaging. But on the more benign product management side of it, you're just trying to tell a good story about the shoe and why it's so good for the consumer. But you want to try to control that narrative all the way as far as you can down the pipeline. Up until I'm assuming you see the final edit of the article, which you don't get approval on, and it shows up and you're like, that one went our way, and you're like, okay, this is great.
So the easiest way to prevent situations like that you don't want, again, is to prepare. And it's much harder with a smaller company, of course, because their manufacturing deadlines aren't as long, and so they can't get product into testers' hands, and they can't, they don't have the budgets perhaps to do a retreat where they're talking to the sales team and the product development team and getting all their questions answered. So when you're smaller, it's harder, but that long lead, that preparation time is still really important. And one of the things, I'm a media trainer. I do a lot of media training for athletes and some for brands. And one of the things that we talk to people about is making sure that you have your 2 or 3 key messages that you want people to come away with, because any more than that, and it gets overwhelming for both the journalist and the consumer. Like, what are the 3 things that you want people to know about that shoe, bottom line, and giving people that open dialogue with, a product team. And one of the things that I love about some of the big companies that have more leeway is that they'll bring PR into the room as they're developing a product. So say you're developing a phone, you've got the product developer and the press person writing a mock press release for that item. What would the price point be? What would the colorways be? How would this resonate for consumers? So you're reverse engineering the whole story so that you're able to actually determine the best messages. So you're talking to the engineers or you're talking to the designers and you're like, oh, those zippers, that's why we put those zippers on this. That's why we put those wheels on this. So you're developing those messages, and you don't have that much surprise when you see the end result because you've actually planned it out.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense if you can drag it in. I'm assuming the large companies, there would always be a PR person in development just to understand the flow. Like, to me, that would make perfect sense.
Well, the big companies too, you have to understand, oftentimes they have 2 different divisions. They have a media relations division and they have a communications division. And they're both working on different parts of the brand story. And then within those divisions, they have subdivisions under them. So it's very, very interesting how different companies structure it. So
what's the division between those 2? What's the functional product that each one would deliver?
It depends on the company, but corporate communications would typically be reporting directly to, say, a C-suite, and they would be talking about things like global warming and sustainability are going to become topics. This was midway through my career. I alerted the company that I was working with. I'd read a National Geographic article on this, us being in the 6th extinction cycle of the planet and everything that was about to happen and how that was going to affect our business. And I had to bring that to the C-suite 6 or 7 times before anybody would listen to me. So I was like, gonna be a thing. Everybody's gonna be talking about it. And then also a corporate communications person would also red flag. I did this as well with a company. Facebook is gonna become a thing. Facebook is gonna become a thing. And you don't always know. Like, is Twitch is a thing right now, you know? It's a very big thing. So you don't always know if everything that you bring to the C-suite is going to be something that they need to pay attention to. But as a corporate comms person, you kind of have to be aware of that. And the corporate comms person would also write the crisis plan and look at who the best speakers are to speak to that crisis PR plan. A corporate comms person would also work on thought leadership, say getting the CEO a South by Southwest panel or something like that.
Right.
And then media relations now can be divided into so many different categories. You know, if you're an action sports company or if you're a company that's in sport in general, you might divide it up into your basketball division, your running division, your tennis, your soccer, and you have experts within those divisions that can actually speak to the product itself.
Yeah. And to the athletes authentically and stuff, I would assume.
Exactly.
So if you're a large company, whether you're an athletic company or electronic company, you're dealing overseas, you've got a factory, people, news is getting out that people are very unhappy, or there's, perceived slave labor, or people are killing themselves, whatever it may be. Who manages that? Like, where does that, is that the corporate comms team that manages that? Because it's just such a big issue. It's outside of product.
That's why when you come in as the head of corporate comms, you really need to do a deep dive into every single area of the business with operations, right, with legal, with HR. I've always said that the farther up I get in my career, the more I'm just working with HR and legal and operations. So you're really diving into those questions with the right people. I'll give you an example.
Right.
Working with a natural wool fabric company, and there was a situation, this was over a decade ago, there was a situation with PETA that had nothing to do with us, but it affected the entire wool industry. So I had to go back with the head of New Zealand Merino and actually write out a giant supporting document that we then shared on social media, indicating how well we treated our 2 million sheep on the islands of New Zealand, freedom from hunger and thirst, all the different shelters that we provided. So that crisis situation, by being transparent and having everything organized and being able to show exactly how well we treated our sheep, that crisis went away for us. Whereas there were other people in the wool industry, and that crisis lingered on for months and months and months. So there's crises like that where you're dealing with outside organizations, and you're also looping in your CEO, and you're looping in your head of operations, you're looping in your head of sales. Maybe your athletes get wind of it, and so the team managers need to tell the whole team of athletes that, don't worry, this situation is not touching us, we're okay. Maybe you do global events and you have to suddenly tell your partners like automotive companies and beverage companies, don't worry, this crisis actually doesn't affect us. So there's a whole tree of communications that need to happen so that nothing gets out of control. And this is also the reason why you have to have regular conversations with journalists that are, either core to your business or financial publications, so that when a crisis does hit, you have a contact at the New York Times that you can go to, or Wall Street Journal, to say, hey, getting this on your radar if you want 10 minutes with our CEO, just to stay ahead of it. Because if you don't stay ahead of it, if you ignore a crisis, it snowballs. 90% of the time I've seen it snowball.
Yeah, it's snowballing on P. Diddy right now. He's having a heck of a time. There's no PR in the world, which leads me to an interesting question. When you bump up against someone and you're dealing with, let's say, personality, or it could be a company, and I've used Lance a million times, and I've met Lance. He's a nice enough guy. But Lance had a PR nightmare in his life, which echoed through 20 companies, 30 companies. I like a giant amount of companies had their own PR nightmare. Kanye not long ago had a nightmare, and Adidas was wrapped in it. And there's these things happen. the contingency plans on an ambassador going sideways in some way or another. Like P. Diddy, although it's a very personal thing that's going sideways, he's got vodka companies, he's got all these things attached, which are product companies. Nothing wrong with his vodka. There's nothing wrong with it. I've never had it, but I'm sure it's fine. And I'm sure the company is set up and it's an organization and it's probably quite large and there's real humans in there trying to manage how the hell they're going to deal with this. They may never be able to escape an atomic bomb blowing up from a personality based issue like that ever. Have you been faced, and you don't have to pinpoint what it was, or maybe you might want to talk about it if it's far enough in the past, but have you been faced with that style of bomb blowing up and being like, okay, we have a product directly tied to this person's name. How do we keep this company not from going broke tomorrow? Like, how does that even happen? Because that's if it's product based, it lands in your lap. You're going to have to deal with it in one way or another.
You have to deal with it. And I'm racking my brain only because there are so many and I can't remember all the NDAs I've signed over the years.
Yeah, don't break an NDA. Don't break an NDA.
But so I would say, obviously, this situation with the merino with the sheep was a very, very big one. Right. I have been involved with athlete injuries, which are quite intense when you're on site at an event and something happens. So that type of situation, I'm just thinking about me being in constant contact with the head of events and making sure that we're communicating with sponsors and other athletes and getting the family the privacy they need, things like that. There's things like that have blown up. But again, it's making sure that your chain of command is signed off on. And most importantly, that once you write the scenario, okay, if an athlete is injured, this is what we're going to do. If a product is recalled, this is what we're going to do. Legal must vet it. You have to get lawyers in there. Right. It's really important. And again, I've worked with so many lawyers over the years looking at every single press release I write. This isn't even for publicly traded companies. This is for, maybe $100 to $500 million companies. You have to get that messaging right and you have to put it through lawyers. That's why I hesitate to even give advice on how you would handle that situation because they're all individual. Right. And so everyone has to sign off on them from a legal perspective. Sometimes you're dealing with, consumer products, regulations and dealing with recalls. You're dealing with a recall that could cost you tens, if not hundreds of $1 million in shipping and postage, not to mention replacing the item, so I'm just trying to think of what else I've done so many different ones. I've had drawstrings that have been not functional on children's hoodies that have had to be had to pull shipment, things like that, helmets, things like that. So you just have to be careful.
It's interesting. So outside of, and I'm just really curious because when the shit hits the fan with whatever problem, you're the one who has to keep your head straight and cool and have a plan. Is that something that was taught to you? Was that built inside of you already and you had that capacity and you sort of came into this role because you sort of discovered that you had that, what I would call a superpower? Anyone who can keep their head together when stuff is blowing up all around them is a magician. How does, is that something that when you're guiding younger PR people up the ladder, that's always a teaching moment? Like, how's that even start? Because to me, that's magic.
It's always a teaching moment for younger staff. And I love to train young people who are just coming out of college because often crisis communications is not taught to them. So I think it's really, really important to let them know early on the steps to manage and handle a crisis situation. And, one of the things that I think C-suites instinctively want to do is to withdraw and ignore it and hope that it goes away. And that never happens. One of the things, if budgets permit, I love to have people who are actual crisis experts come in and workshop situations. I was working for a brand that was $2.6 billion for several years, and brilliant people at the brand. They were what do they call it? Flying the plane as they were building it. And so there were a lot of things that they were trying to make right. Even though they were moving so fast. I mean, you're making like $100 million a month. It was crazy. So actually, I called in a company out of Brooklyn. They were former big agency guys. They just started an agency, and I had them help me and guide me through these war room situations because they were involved in them every single day. You know, if you're dealing with crisis, but then you're also dealing with making sure you're hitting your product timelines for your tech reviewers, you know, it's a completely, like, they're two separate jobs. You need to keep everything running while you're dealing with this crisis. And if you've got one person or one team in charge of all of it, then they often stop everything. Had a situation with a client who had a very sexy product that they collabed on with Playboy. The reaction from the market did not expect that. I ended up working with Playboy's crisis PR team for 3 months. Literally every single day, we were doing a 2-hour strategy session in the morning on how to deal with what was rolling out that day. And Playboy was just really used to it, and they were really brilliant at it. So I was maybe my mid-30s at the time. I'm in my mid-50s now. They were just so good about showing me the steps because it happened all day long for them.
Transform your trade marketing with Regulator, where trade marketing precision meets sales tool performance. Regulator ensures every marketing dollar is spent wisely, keeps your team aligned with defined user governance. Whether you're managing local campaigns or global initiatives, Regulator keeps your marketing efforts streamlined and effective in the real world. Give us 15 minutes to show you how we will save you time and money. Go to brandregulator.com.
So
Yeah, they're in a constant crisis. They're just constantly being attacked by something, I'm assuming,
right.
just because they're polarizing.
Yep.
Your career that's got you to this place where you can explain PR very, very well. Where was your starting point? Why PR?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I guess that's my first question is why, and how did you end up there? Like, I believe most people, good people that have established careers, almost never started out, unless you're an engineer or a doctor and you have to go to school to do that. In marketing, I've never met anyone that is really, really, really good. That's like, oh yeah, I got my MBA in this, and that was the first thing I did, and then I rolled my career out. It's like anyone who has an MBA in marketing that's in marketing right now, they got it partway through their marketing career.
Right.
Because they thought they needed it, not because they had it to begin with and they then went on and crushed it.
Right.
They had this insane intuition to be able to do whatever subset of marketing that they were good at and just kept going. Like Rick Rubin famously barely understands music, barely, but yet he's one of the greatest producers in the world. He's not trained in music.
Right.
He's just got an insane ear and he knows what he likes, and the rest of humanity likes it in general. So how did you end up where you are?
So
what's the story?
Yeah, so I just actually wrote the story. I wrote a book, and it'll be out early next year. I'm actually going to go with Spotify audio first because it's a book that's basically targeted towards music lovers in the music industry. So from 1988 to 1997, I worked for the original Hard Rock Cafes. I worked for one of the founders, and I was selected out of 2,000 people in San Diego to be on a grand opening team for the restaurant in La Jolla. And I went through a rigorous training process at the age of 18. I mean, the way that Hard Rock trained their employees, talk about crisis preparedness. There was an answer to every question that any employee could have. We were tested every single day of training, 2 weeks of training, and we had to get 90% or above on our tests, or we were eliminated. We were just thrown out. So out of 2,000 people, 200 of us were hired, and I made the cut of the final 100 people. And I stayed there for a decade. I traveled around and I opened restaurants. I went to Hawaii, I went to New Orleans, went to San Francisco. I was in Vegas back when Vegas was a ghost town. There were 20 of us that followed one of our general managers out there, and we actually, helped put the city back on the map with young people. And then 5 years later, we opened the first Hard Rock Hotel. But
Yeah.
that
The famous round bar that I've been drunk at a few
the
times.
famous round bar, exactly. But
Yeah.
but really, that company was so incredibly organized and so ethical. I mean, at 18 years old, myself and all of my colleagues, who I'm still great friends with, there were over 400 of us, full medical and dental benefits, full 401k plans. We were allowed to transfer as long as you were exceptional at your job. You were allowed to transfer to any other Hard Rock. So it was like a free ticket around the world, essentially. And it was one of the greatest experiences of my life because everyone was a great mentor. And so the Northridge earthquake hit LA, and I'd been there, for 8 months, I think. And they needed someone to break the receptionist because she was stuck in Northridge at home. And so I started answering phones, and I'd answered phones in junior high school. And this is really different, our generation, Gen Xers, compared to kids now. I knew how to answer 2,000 to 3,000 incoming phone calls because I'd done it in junior high school working my switchboard. And at Hard Rock, there were about 10,000 phone calls coming in a day to the corporate office in Beverly Hills, and I was answering every single one of them. And about a third of them were going to the marketing department, this little 2-person marketing department, and I kept running stuff back there. And then the vice president of marketing was the nicest man. He's still one of my greatest mentors. He was so nice. He brought me in to this little 2-person team. The head of PR taught me how to write. She would mark up my papers every single day, teaching me how to write. I would answer the phones. It was every major agent in Hollywood would be calling every single day to book their bands.
Of course.
We'd have a 5K race in Aspen to benefit a local charity, and we'd have maybe $5,000-$10,000 to hire a band. The new band coming up, Dave Matthews Band, perfect band for this event. And so all these baby bands, as they were coming up, we got to interact with them at the restaurants because I'd opened so many restaurants before. I knew the layout of each facility, so I was kind of an event manager too. So I was there for almost a decade, and I was there when the founder sold it to a big international conglomerate. And then I was working on a global merger at the age of 27, which was a fantastic experience too.
Experience the ultimate in brand hygiene with Regulator's Market Check AI engine. Powered by your team's in-market photos. Regulator AI insights guide both marketing and sales teams in making informed decisions and allow your trade marketing team to maximize impact and deliver sales tools with laser precision. This, combined with Regulator's gold standard toolset, you will efficiently manage custom art, fixtures, point of purchase materials, and promotions, ensuring a dynamic and responsive market presence for your brand. Give us 15 minutes to show you how we will save you time and money. Go to brandregulator.com.
I had a gentleman on who worked at Red Bull years ago and was involved with Sean and the super pipe and the Olympics and stuff. You've had such strange exposure to people, you can't find, maybe most likely as humans, Bernie and Shaun White are not that fundamentally different. What they do, exceedingly fundamentally different. How do you morph when the product changes so dramatically? Because you are a gun for hire. People can come and hire you. What is your I am better at marketing. I can market. Well, I can't market everything. I can market product well. I relate to physical items. And I can, whether it's an amazing range, kitchen set from Fisher Paykel, which is one of my clients. I understand that stuff. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense to me. Or it's a pair of sunglasses from Oakley or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
hockey skates from CCM.
Mm-hmm.
I can move from diverse product to product, but you have to move an insane product width and also deal with humans and ideology.
Mm-hmm.
How do you relate? Can you do PR for something that you don't necessarily relate to? Is my first question.
Yes. So for me, the number one most important thing is for the story to be authentic. The story has to resonate with me, because I can't sell something that I don't believe in. And there have been a few times where I've half-heartedly believed in something, and I'm trying my heart out to sell it to the media, but it's not landing with them as well. I think that if someone is authentic, then they're just going to resonate, and it's your job as a PR person to elevate that story. So, Sean's a good example. He had a big team around him. Obviously, he had the Red Bull team around him. He had a fantastic agent. And I had been working with him in various capacities from the time he was like 9 years old. I mean, the first time that Steve Astafin worked with Sims to do a world championship of snowboarding out in Vail, Sean won the entire event, and he was sitting there with a Samsonite suitcase full of money that he opened up, and he was just throwing it in the air. He was a kid, he was like 9 years old, 9 or 10. But I knew, knowing him at 9 or 10, and then Target was a client of mine, so I remember going to Sean's house to do something for them once, and he was maybe 14. By the time I got to Burton, Sean was ready to win the Olympics. I mean, he was poised to win his first gold medal. And I just had a feeling, I just knew that he could potentially, if he medaled, he had such a personality, and he was so authentic, and he was so genuine that I was in charge of the purse strings, and there were a lot of other PR people involved that had been working with him a long time too. But because for that particular event, I was in charge of the purse strings for the Olympic PR, I just put all my chips in the Sean basket. I was like, this is gonna happen. If he wins, people are gonna love him as much as we've all loved him since he was a toddler and little Grom. So it's just being the right PR person at the right time that has the budget and the authority and the bosses that say go, to do it, and so you can look back on anything, look at my LinkedIn profile, anybody that I've worked for, they're all so authentic, and that it makes it really.
That leads me to a question. Sorry to cut you off, but I want to get so you threw all your chips in on Sean. I'm really curious. What was your contingency if he failed? You had one.
Oh,
what was it?
Well, at the time, the company that I was working for had 17 global athletes, and they also had women competing in half pipe the next night. So we were pretty sure that one athlete was going to win. She actually didn't, and another athlete came forward and got the gold. So we had the male and female gold medalists. But we were pretty sure that we could pivot all the resources that we'd brought over to Italy to one of our international athletes as well. If one of our international athletes were poised to win or to podium, we could have just pivoted that strategy. So that was a risk that we were willing to take, I think. The C-suite was willing to take it. The head of marketing was willing to take it. The team managers, Sean's agents, and everyone. So my job, I don't like taking credit for that, but I'm definitely the one that asked for the money to bring a lot of PR people over to manage it if it happened. So worst case scenario, we have way too many people running around at the foot of the half pipe. But as it was, we barely had enough people, both in Italy and around the world, to get the job done. So
yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. Hey, I've got a thing that I used to do, and I'm going to bring this up to you. So I used to do a thing called Cool Confessional, where I believe that I want to give away all my secrets.
Okay.
I don't want to go to the grave. Like I truly believe that a naked man can't be pickpocketed. So if everyone knows all the dumb stuff that I've done in my life, and I've gone over all of them, I think it's a thing. And so the other day I was on Instagram and I got I was drinking wine and I got looped into buying this like box of cards, and it's called "How Deep Will You Go?"
Uh-oh.
And there are, you're the first.
Uh-oh. Okay.
So there are wild cards. There are level 1,
Okay.
which is called icebreakers.
Okay.
Then level 2 is confessions. Level 3 is getting deep. So for you, you get to pick which one you want to go to, level 1, level 2, level 3, or wild card. And whatever you do,
Okay.
and we'll pick a card. We'll have producer Brad come over and pick it.
Producer Brad.
You have to answer the question
Okay.
to the best of your ability, and whatever level you pick, I'll go the level higher.
Really? Okay. All right.
Of course.
I'm going to
So pick
wild card.
Pick your level.
Wild card.
You're going right to the top. Wild card can be anything. So I don't know, and I haven't read these cards.
Okay.
And so I'm going to fan these out, and then you'll get to pick whichever one I get to do.
Okay.
And Brad pick a card. Okay, that's the card. All right. So,
tension. The drum roll here.
Here we go.
Oh, I can't see. You're a little blurry.
Yeah, it's okay. What is a recent leap of faith that worked out for you? Could be anything. Business, personal.
A recent leap of faith. Oh, so this is a good one. It's not recent, but it's relatively recent. So right before the pandemic, I was on a girls' trip to Palm Springs, and I was driving down the 101 to go back to Los Angeles. I looked over at this hill by Bob Hope's house, where there are these beautiful windows that are cut into the hill, and floor-to-ceiling windows. And so I decided, and there was a realtor sign. So I pulled in, and I fell madly in love with this condo, booked an extra night at a hotel, and made an offer the next morning. And this condo that I got was absolutely stunning. It was a mid-century modern. It was built in the 60s. It had floor-to-ceiling windows in the bedroom and the living room. So I got the condo, I got a dog, and then the pandemic hit. And I was in the perfect place to just sit there and look out at this serene landscape for 3 years with absolutely no one around. And I ended up writing a book there, and that rest is great. Yeah.
Perfect answer.
Okay.
I love it. Okay. So out of the same categories, and P.S., I know that area really well. I stayed there for a month, and it is beautiful. I mountain biked the hell out of that hill.
Oh, nice.
Did you walk the hike up and go look at Bob Hope, like the house from above and all?
Every day the dog and I walked up there.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Okay, level 1, level 2, level 3, wild card. You get to pick for me.
Okay, level 2.
Oh, that's easy. Okay, Brad, you can come pick my card.
Brad and I are old friends. We go way back. You know, he's my Austin City Limits Music Festival buddy.
We're gonna get a spicy one for Jimmy. I can tell.
Yeah, I don't know if you can guess it. Who knows? Okay. My question is, oh, Jesus Christ. What's your biggest insecurity?
Oh, wow.
Is that. And I actually have to think about this.
Okay.
I know what it is. Okay. I have an unbelievable, and it drives me every second of the day. I have an unbelievable insecurity about failure. An unbelievable. It's so big that it drives everything in my life. And so everything I do is overdone to the point, and it's all driven from the root of that insecurity. So I turned 50, and I started analyzing who I was. And I was an athlete, and I didn't necessarily love all the aspects of my personality. I could be a bully, I could be brutish, I could be wicked, I could be cruel. And all of these were tools that I learned as a young man to pull out better athletic performance and stuff. And it just became a thing, like basketball players or, you know, just as an example, are renowned for their trash talking, and it's part of the sport, but it turns them in, like, their wit becomes exceedingly sharp, and it can be wicked and unairable. You know, you can't air it on TV, and it's like, it can be hard. And when I started analyzing all these things, all of it sits at the root of that insecurity of failing. Yeah. And so there you go. You learned a little bit about me.
You know, I think that a lot of highly successful people have that. And I think that I just remembered something that I saw in a Jennifer Lopez interview once. She's like, nobody tells you that even when you get to the very top, you want your mommy. Because you're like, something to that.
That's a fact.
You know, because you're just, you just reach. You have this drive to reach, right? So you just want to succeed, prove.
I feel it's in everybody. Part of one of the quotes I love is, no one's ever jealous of what it took for you to get the beautiful house. They're just jealous of the house, right? Yeah. No one is jealous of the late nights and the super brutal hard work and the tears and the blisters to get to whatever you have. They just look at the final thing and go, "Oh, I'm jealous."
Yeah.
But it's such a vapid emotion because of that, because you don't think of really what it took. And sure, some people luck into things, or they get generational wealth, but even that comes with its own price, as seen multiple times through life with a million cautionary tales. Anyways, okay.
Well, George,
there we go.
You know, George Clooney said it only takes 20 years to become an overnight success. So
yeah, that's a straight fact. Yeah. That's a straight fact. Thank you so much for the time. Thanks for educating me. I'd love to chat with you in the future. I know that once your book comes out, there'll be more to talk about, and you're always sticking your fingers into the fun stuff. And one day when you can, I'd love to talk politics. It's a little bit spicy right now to talk about politics, but one day I think that would be a really interesting thing.
Yes.
Because I feel that there's enough cautionary tales that could be expressed out that just would help tons of people. And they don't have to be specific against people, but like situational stuff that I could only imagine would ever come up on campaign trails where it's just wild.
Exactly. So, there are a couple other people I might recommend for that too, who've been doing it far longer than me. I have a lot of people that I look to. But in the meantime, definitely follow the Sanders Institute. I'm the communications director there. And that's Bernie Sanders' wife, Jane Sanders, and son, Dave Driscoll. It's their think tank. And we work on all the progressive issues of the time. So there's some great information and reports and things on there. So we'll have to, at some point, get you hooked up with somebody from there.
Yeah, I would love to. I've listened to a couple podcasts with Bernie on it, and he is an exceedingly interesting human. And I can only imagine that there'll be some very interesting conversations that could be had around that. Like, it's super interesting, very smart fella. So thank you, Shana. It was amazing to chat with you.
Thank you.
Everyone else, welcome back. It's been a little bit of a break, so thanks for coming back and listening to Marketeers Clubhouse. We will be chatting with more guests in the next couple of weeks. We'll see you all soon.